I wasn't gonna make a video on this. The news of Apple's M3 update. It's Halloween, it's my birthday, but I just had so many thoughts about this thing that I have to do this. Okay, so the short of it is that Apple launched their new M3 chips. These have been put into their 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros, so those have been refreshed, and those now have an option for a space black color. And they've also updated their iMac, the colorful all-in-one devices. And fortunately, on that iMac, it still has the amazing Lightning port charged Magic Mouse. Thank God they didn't change that masterpiece. Now, I think this whole announcement could have just been a tweet, or at best like a press release or something. But Apple, being Apple, was more ambitious, and they shot this whole event, this Halloween-themed event that was shot on the iPhone 15 Pro, which is pretty cool. They clearly have confidence in their camera systems there. But there were three things that kind of jumped out at me that I want to talk about. The first is that 14-inch base model MacBook Pro. This new 14-inch MacBook Pro replaces this device, or a device very much like this, the 13-inch MacBook Pro that had just like the base M1 and M2 chips. This product is now gone, and it's been replaced with the new base model 14-inch MacBook Pro, which has pretty much the exact same chassis as the upper echelon 14-inch Pro models, except it has one less USB-C port, and it doesn't come in black. It only has the space gray and silver colors. But it does have the 120 Hz screen, still has an SD card reader, which is great. The thing is, this new 14-inch base model starts at $1,600. Now, during the event, Apple was like, it previously started at $1999, and now it starts at just $1599. And my immediate reaction, I think for a lot of people, is like, oh, did they lower the price? It's not that they lowered the price, they just introduced this kind of feature-stripped economy model, which is fine, right? Because I think having a kind of lower price point entry model for this product line, it's fine, except at $1,600, it has 8 gigs of RAM. And this just does not sit well with me. Like, I have made videos on this before where I've defended Apple's decision to include 8 gigs of RAM on their kind of entry-level models. Because the way that Apple uses RAM, 8 gigs is enough for a lot of people. But on this new model, a 14-inch Pro model that has the Pro moniker, it just does not make sense to me. Considering the price point, the year that it is, 2023, the type of product that it is, a Pro model, 8 gigs of RAM is so silly. Also, this device, it's got a higher resolution screen than any 13 or even 15-inch laptop that Apple makes. And just by nature of having more pixels, there's more pixels to push, is more VRAM required to do it, which is shared. So just the 8 gigs of RAM that's on that new 14-inch device, this has more pressure than any device they've had before with 8 gigs of RAM. So it just makes no sense to me. I would have, like, when I think about this, what they should have done is had a 16 gigabyte model as the base and just given people 256 gigs of storage at the base. But then what they're doing is they're just upselling, right? They know that anyone who's buying this product has a really high chance of purchasing that extra RAM upgrade, and therefore it's an $1,800 product and not really a $1,600 product. It bugs me. It really does. And again, this is coming from someone who has adamantly defended their choice of 8 gigs of RAM on their entry-level models. I still believe in that. Except on this thing, on a $1,600 like Pro model, no man. It really shouldn't exist. Okay, the second thing that kind of piqued my interest was their whole conversation about performance. So M3, I think it's a pretty decent uptick in performance. Now, they compared it to M1 a lot, which is fine, I guess, but then they compared it to the Intel-based MacBooks, which are like 4.5 years old, which is kind of weird. But in general, I think a decent bump in performance, and again, very focused on energy efficiency. So the M3 GPU can deliver similar performance to the M1 GPU, but just using half the power, and up to 65% more performance at peak. This is Apple's claims. And for the CPU, it can supposedly push out 35% more performance at peak. But the biggest gains are in that GPU department. You also get hardware ray tracing, hardware mesh shading, and there's also this new feature, they call it dynamic caching, which is essentially variable memory allocation for the GPU, which is wild. Like, the idea that there's very little documentation at this point, at least from Apple, as to how this is done and what it actually does for developers, but the idea of it sounds really cool. That needs to be something that we examine in a future review. But I see a lot of commentary about how, like, this wasn't a big enough performance gain. I'm like, I totally disagree with that. Obviously, year on year, we all want to see, 300% increases every year. But For Apple to get to a 3 nanometer process while improving the performance year on year, all done in the span of 3 years' time, it's quite impressive. If you consider what Intel's been doing for the past 3 years, I mean, come on, you got to give Apple a break there. They did mention just real quickly their whole black color and how they have a special anodization process that reduces fingerprints. So I'm hopeful, like I hope Apple does it properly, because this right here, this is the Razer Blade. This has a coating that's supposed to reduce fingerprints on the black anodized aluminum. And I mean, you tell me, is it working? I think that if Apple's gonna make this claim, I think it's legit. And theirs isn't a coating, theirs is actually in the anodization process itself. So I hope, at least for the people that want black laptops, that it is fingerprint resistant, because that is something that plagues basically every black aluminum laptop that I've ever touched. Okay, the last thing I want to touch on is the event itself. It was a strange event, right? And as I sat there last night after dinner at 8 p.m., a PM for every gig of RAM that they're including, I was like, why is this happening right now? It just felt so out of place for Apple. The event itself, it's just a themed event for a MacBook launch or a MacBook refresh. Strange. So a couple things come to mind. First, they have their earnings call coming up in a couple days, and I feel like this is something to kind of pad the meters a bit. But there is something else. In 6 weeks' time, Intel's supposed to be launching their new Meteor Lake laptop chip, and this thing is supposed to be revolutionary. Intel's gone on record saying it's like the biggest architectural shift they've had in 40 years. This product is supposed to be wild, like super powerful, super energy efficient, on par with Apple has, and a very powerful GPU. Like from all the leaks and rumors I've seen, this thing looks crazy impressive. But I think the existence of this upcoming chip, that's like literally in a month and a half, I think Apple just wants to get into this game and be like, hey, we got M3, and it's pretty good too. But there you have it. M3. Happy Halloween.